All right, so let's talk for a second. How many times have you finished a coding tutorial, maybe added a couple of features, challenged yourself doing something new, got everything done, felt good, showed it off to your friends, your family, your loved ones, and then the very next day when you went back to go build something similar to that to reinforce what you learned, you absolutely forgot everything. Look, we've all been there. Don't get upset. Don't beat yourself up. You're not dumb. Your brain isn't broken. You don't need to go see a neurosurgeon or anything. You're just learning passively. So in this video, I want to show you 3 things that you could do to make sure what you're learning actually sticks, so that by the time you look to rebuild or add on to whatever it is that you just learned, it sticks and you're actually growing and adding more things into your learning toolbox. So let's talk about it. All right, so before we jump in, let's talk about what is passive learning versus active learning. Most of us that are learning something new, we tend to learn passively first, and then we kind of branch into learning actively. So like learning passively would be something like watching a coding tutorial, reading a book, reading a blog post, whatever it is that you could think of, or whatever source that you like to get your information from. Following along what someone else built, allowing them to show you what they done, what dependencies they use, how did they get everything accomplished. That's what you're going to refer to as learning passively. Active learning means you're doing something based on what you just saw, what you just learned. So like if you're watching a coding tutorial, you may say, hey, let me pause this for a second. We just built a responsive nav menu. Let me see if I could build this on my own, either before the instructor builds it or maybe right after it. Not necessarily trying to memorize the code, but more so of, hey, let me just follow these key steps, these patterns, so that I could try to build this on my own. That's going to be something that's a little more active. You built a to-do app or you built a banker application versus just following the same code that you did. Go ahead and pause that video and try to build it for yourself first, and then use the video as your reference for answers or your guide for where you got stuck. That's going to be something that's a little more active. Doing something with a little bit more of a purpose, going through the process of debugging, having to find those answers, thinking critically, that's what you refer to as active learning. If you're just sitting back and watching someone else doing it, you're kind of tricking yourself into thinking that you're actually learning something, but in actuality, you're really not. You're just following the instructions that someone else actually put into place. Typically, what you want to do is you want to write down the key things so that you can kind of remember, hey, if I'm building a CRUD app, I want to make sure I'm remembering the model, the view, the controller, the MVC, because no matter what project that you're building, if it's full stack, you're typically going to always have a model, you're always going to have a view, and you're always going to have some form of a controller. Active learning is going to focus more so on the concept and you doing it on your own, versus passive learning is going to be following what someone else done because you're just trying to either learn something or get something up quick. Yes, you're going to pick up some things along the way, but you're not really strategically forcing yourself to learn something the same way you would if you were active learning. All right, so that's going to lead me into my second point. No matter what you're doing to learn, you always want to make sure you're building something while you learn. So here's a rule that I like to follow, what I used to like to follow when I would follow a coding tutorial to learn something. I would never finish that tutorial without building something on my own. For me personally, I would have the project that the instructor is teaching, but then I also have a separate project that I'm building on my own to kind of help reinforce that learning. So like, think about it like this. If I'm building a blog application, you know, you're going to have some form of authentication. You're going to have a CRUD with the blog. You may even add comments or likes or things like that. So if I know I'm building a blog application, what is something similar to a blog app that I can build that can kind of challenge me outside of what the instructor is teaching, but also give me an opportunity to kind of force myself to learn something new without following what they're teaching. So I may turn this blog application into a social media app, or I may turn the blog application into some form of a booking app. If you think about it, they're very, very similar. With a social media post and a blog application, both projects, you're creating something, you're updating something, you're deleting something, and you want to get all of something. The difference between the two is that with a blog application, you may say, hey, I have a database like MongoDB or Postgres where it's not real time and I can store information and I have time for loading features. Wherein with the social media app, you may want to use a real-time database that's going to give you an immediate response back, because usually on a social media app, there's a communication that happens instantly. You don't have time for data to continue to be refetched from the database and different things like that. But I know you can leverage caching, but that's for a whole nother video. But the point I'm trying to make for this is that don't just settle for what the instructor is teaching and use that as your measurement of learning. Take that information and then say, hey, what can I turn this into that will fit something else that I'm interested in building, but also challenge me in ways to say, hey, I'm learning, or I'm using the skills that I have absorbed in this project, but now I'm going to take it and I'm going to push myself to do something a little further or a little more challenging, so that I'm reinforcing that learning and picking up new things along the way. That's kind of how you want to think about it, because your brain is going to remember better when it is given context, not just repetition. You want to be strategic about what it is that you're doing and build upon what it was that you just learned. So the last thing I want to leave you with, and this is something that I've picked up recently and I genuinely enjoy doing, is teaching it. Whatever it is that I learn, I like to teach it back, not just for my own personal gratification, so that I can help remember, help stick, and kind of force myself to learn terminology and not be lazy with different things. Because if you're teaching someone something, you got to teach people the right way. But I also want to give back, because I use free resources to kind of help kickstart my coding journey until I took a little more professional route, or structured route, I should say. But there's nothing wrong with free resources. In fact, typically a self-taught person is a little more driven than someone that sat in a structured environment, because they're having to bring their own discipline. They're having to kind of find their own path, and they're having to kind of find ways to learn without someone actually telling them what they should be learning. But not everyone is comfortable teaching online or teaching in a public environment where other people can absorb it. There's nothing wrong with teaching it back to someone that you know. There's nothing wrong with explaining it to someone that may be interested in a one-on-one environment, and allow that person to ask you questions and challenge your concepts, because all it's going to do is make you better, to make sure that you understand certain things very thoroughly, because you have to find ways to connect with people and relate to people so that they can understand what you're teaching, absorb it based upon how they learn, and then follow up with you if they need additional advice or additional guidance if something doesn't stick with them. If I don't explain something clearly to someone, then they're not going to be able to learn. What I typically like to do is maybe just diagram out what it is that I'm going to teach, so I have some form of an idea or outline what it is that I'm going to be going over with someone, and don't necessarily use word for word what it is that you're trying to convey to someone else. Remember, the syntax can change, words can change, but the overall concepts typically remain the same. You know, with the full stack application, you're going to always have certain things that you want to follow. The syntax may be different based upon the language that you're learning, but the concepts remain the same. That's the same thing when you're teaching someone. That's the same thing when you're learning the code. Yes, you may be learning JavaScript, you may be learning Java. However, certain things are going to be very similar with Python as well. The biggest difference is just going to be the syntax and the different dependencies and how you install them on your machine. So don't be afraid that once you've learned something and you have a good understanding of it, to take a little bit of time to study it, to master it, to really get an understanding of it, so that you can attempt to teach it to someone else. I chose to use a public platform to really kind of get outside of my comfort zone, but this may not be the right avenue for you. It may be better for you to teach it to your little brother or your little sister, or maybe even a parent, because they have absolutely no clue what it is that you're talking about, but they're going to give you their undivided attention. And more than likely, they're going to give you some critical feedback if you stumble along the way or if you don't make any sense. So if you can get that person to understand what it is that you're trying to teach, that may not have any experience to what it is that you're talking about, then hey, you know you're on the right track. Or if you spend so much time absorbing coding content like myself, my wife once told me, said, hey, look, I'm starting to learn what you're learning because you're talking about it so much, and I'm picking up on little things that you're teaching or that you're teaching yourself. I'm kind of learning it along the way. that's a good sign that you're not just doing things passively listening to someone else, but you're actually challenging yourself and you're actively learning. And I'm able to convey things to her or my kids or whoever it is that I listen or that I'm speaking to. And if they can understand it, then that means that I'm doing something right, because this is someone that doesn't understand anything about this arena, but whatever concept that I'm conveying to them, they actually are picking up on it. So it may not be online. It may be a different it may be a different channel, but don't be afraid to teach it. And remember, teaching requires preparation. It requires your understanding, and it also requires you to be able to connect with your audience. So this is going to be something that is very powerful, and it really kind of helped me as well. And I want you to take the time to really kind of teach certain concepts back to people, because you find it's beneficial not only for the other person, but for you as well. So with that, that's going to conclude today's video. So remember, anytime you're learning, you want to watch less and do more. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty. Remix your learning a little bit. Don't just do exactly what that tutorial or instructor is asking you to do. Maybe do it, but also work on something separate. And then also teach it. It may not be in a public platform. It may not be with a lot of people around. It may start with one person regardless. Remember, it's the process that you're chasing. You want to make sure that you are absorbing the information. You want to make sure that you're digesting it. You want to be prepared. You want to be accurate. And then you want to find ways to connect with your viewers or your audience. So you're not bad at learning. You're not dumb. You just have to challenge yourself and continue to evolve. So let me know the last time you learned something new. What were some tactics that you took in order to really grasp the concept? And how did you make sure that it stick? And also, if you found this video useful, give your boy a like, consider subscribing or a follow, and I'll see you in the next one.